travel expense reports. Nobody except me. I pulled out a thick black binder labeled Unmapped Asset A7329. This was my life's work. Not the compliance training I pretended to run, but the shadow audit I'd been conducting since the day Walter Brandt first charged a $5,000 consulting fee to a company that didn't exist. I sat on the floor, the binder heavy in my lap. I opened it to the most recent tab. The smell of the office was still in my nose, that unique blend of cheap carpet glue and ambition. I needed to scrub it out. I poured myself a glass of water, no ice, room temperature. Efficient. I booted up my laptop, not the company-issued brick they confiscated, but a custom rig with encryption strong enough to give the NSA a migraine. I logged into a backdoor access portal I'd installed in OmniCore server architecture back in 2018, disguised as a printer driver update. I watched the logs scroll by. They were already scrubbing. Predictable, I muttered. I could see Murphy's login credentials clumsy fumbling through the HR database, deleting my active status, erasing my email archives. He was using a digital sledgehammer when he should have been using a scalpel. He was deleting the records of the files, but not the metadata of the deletion itself. Every time he hit erase, he was leaving a fingerprint that said, "I have something to hide." But the real beauty was what they missed. 6 months ago, I noticed Brandt was getting greedy. He wasn't just skimming off the top anymore, he was gouging chunks out of the hull. He had set up a new vendor, Apex Logistics, to handle shipping for a massive defense contract. Apex Logistics was just Brandt's brother-in-law with a P.O. box in Delaware. I knew if I moved too soon, they'd shred everything. So, I became part of the rot. I created a ghost. I navigated to the vendor list on my screen. There it was, buried deep in the subcontractor tier, Veridian Tactical Supplies. Veridian didn't exist. I had created the LLC using the same shell company templates Brandt used. I had routed the paperwork through his own rubber stamp approval process. He signed it without reading, just like he signed everything that promised a kickback. But here's the twist. Veridian Tactical Supplies was the only vendor in the system that was fully, 100% compliant with Federal Oversight Regulation 44B. And Regulation 44B requires an automated, external backup of all communication involving the vendor. By signing that contract, Brandt had legally authorized a redundant server to copy every single email, invoice, and Slack message he sent regarding the project. He thought he was approving another slush fund. He was actually signing a warrant for his own digital wiretap. I checked the status of the Veridian server. It was humming along beautifully, capturing everything. I saw a new email from Brandt to his personal lawyer, timestamped 20 minutes ago. Subject, "The bitch is gone." Body, "We're clear." Murphy walked her out. Scrub the Discord logs just in case, but she doesn't know about the Cayman accounts. We're safe. I took a sip of my tepid water. The arrogance was breathtaking. It was almost art. He truly believed that because I wore cardigans and organized the Secret Santa, I was incapable of understanding complex embezzlement schemes. He thought compliance officer meant doormat. I reached for my phone, a burner prepaid disposable. I dialed a number that didn't appear in any contact list. It rang once. Status? A voice asked. No greeting. Just a gravelly baritone that sounded like it had been gargling with asphalt. This was Handler Zero. My contact at the DOJ. "I'm out," I said. "They terminated the cover." "Compromised?" "No," I said, running a finger down the spine of the black binder. "Arrogant. They're cleaning house because they're about to scale up the theft. They think I was just dead weight." "Do we pull the plug?" Zero asked. I looked at the screen at Brandt's email. "We're safe." "Not yet," I said. The anger in my chest was cold, heavy, and solid. It wasn't the fiery rage of a scorned woman. It was the geological pressure of a mountain waiting to crush a miner. They need to feel safe. I want them to relax. I want them to think they've won. Let them spend the weekend high-fiving. "Timeline? Give me 48 hours, I said. "I have the breadcrumbs laid out. I just need to make sure the rats follow them." "You're walking a thin line, Angela. If they realize you have the data..." "They think my biggest concern right now is filing for unemployment," I interrupted. "They don't know I'm the one who built the maze they're running in." 48 hours, Zero said. "Then we bring the hammer." "No," I corrected him, closing the laptop with a soft snap. "I am the hammer. You guys are just the cleanup crew." I hung up. The apartment was silent again. I looked at the binder. I had them dead to rights. But justice isn't just about the verdict, it's about the terror of the realization. I wanted Brandt to sweat. I wanted him to wake up in the middle of the night wondering why the air felt thinner. I walked to the window and looked out at the city skyline. Somewhere out there, Walter Brandt was pouring a scotch, laughing about the legacy hire he just fired. "Drink up, Walter," I whispered. "It's the last good drink you're going to have." Memory is a funny thing. Sometimes it's a blur, and sometimes it's 4K video footage with crystal clear audio. For me, it's usually the latter, especially when I'm wearing a wire. I closed my eyes and let myself drift back 5 years. The annual Contractors for Kids Gala. A ballroom at the Hyatt Regency that smelled of desperate cologne, hairspray, and prime rib that had been sitting under heat lamps for too long. It was a sea of black ties and sparkly dresses, a room full of people who charged the government $500 for hammer and then patted themselves on the back for buying a table at a charity event. I was there as support staff, which meant I was holding Brandt's extra business cards and making sure his wife didn't drink too many martinis before the keynote speech. Walter Brandt was in his element. He was 3 scotches deep, his face flushed an alarming shade of crimson, holding court near the ice sculpture of a fighter jet. "It's a volume game, boys," Brandt was shouting to a circle of sycophants, junior VPs from rival firms who were hoping to catch some of his overflow. "You think the margins are in the tech? Hell no. The margins are in the logistics. The padding." I stood about 4 feet away, clutching a clutch that contained a high-fidelity audio recorder disguised as a tube of lipstick. I looked bored. I looked like I was thinking about my cat. In reality, I was angling my purse to capture every syllable. "But Walter," one of the junior VPs asked, a kid with gelled hair and fear in his eyes, "doesn't the DCA audit the shipping manifests?" Brandt laughed, slapping the kid on the shoulder hard enough to spill his drink. "Audit, son, they don't have the manpower to audit a lemonade stand. You bury the cost in MISC expediting fees. You charge Uncle Sam $800 for a folding chair because it had to be tactically deployed. It's not fraud if they sign the check." The circle laughed. It was a nervous, wet sound. They wanted to be him, but they were terrified of being caught. Brandt didn't have that fear. He had the invincibility of a mediocre white man who had failed upwards his entire life. He turned and saw me standing there. His eyes slid over me like I was a piece of furniture. "Angela," he bellowed, waving me over, "get over here. Tell these boys about the audit last year, the one with the labor hours." I stepped forward, smiling the smile of a flight attendant during turbulence. "You mean when you reclassified the janitorial staff as environmental sanitation engineers to bill at a higher tier, sir?" The room went quiet for a split second. Brandt blinked, then roared with laughter. "See? She knows the game. Best damn secretary in the business." "Compliance officer." I corrected him in my head. "And I'm not playing the game, Walter. I'm refereeing it." "She's a vault," Brandt slurred, leaning in close to the gelled hair kid, dropping his voice to a conspiratorial whisper that the lipstick recorder picked up perfectly. "Doesn't talk, doesn't complain, just fixes the paperwork. You need a woman like that, not smart enough to ask questions, but organized enough to hide the answers. Not smart enough." That was the moment. That was the exact second it stopped being just an assignment and became personal. I felt a cold, prickly heat spread across my neck. He didn't see me as a threat because he didn't see me as a person. He saw me as an appliance, a toaster that processed invoices. I kept my smile frozen in place. "Shall I get you another drink, sir? The keynote is starting." Yeah, he waved me off. "Double, no ice. And make sure my wife is sitting next to the senator, not the stunning blonde from Lockheed. Don't want a scene." I walked to the bar. My hands were steady. I ordered his drink. I looked at the reflection in the mirror behind the bar, the chaotic swirl of the party, the balloons, the For the Kids banner drooping on one side. It was all so grotesque. These people were strip-mining the country and calling it patriotism. I took the drink back to him. As I handed it over, I looked at his sweaty, jubilant face. "Here you go, sir," I said. "Good girl," he muttered, not looking at me. I went home that night and uploaded the audio file to a secure server. I labeled it Evidence Item 049 Admission of Intent. Back in the present, sitting on my floor with the binder, I touched the digital file on my screen. That recording was the cornerstone. It proved intent. It proved he wasn't just negligent, he was predatory. He had called me not smart enough. I closed the binder. Memory didn't hurt anymore. It was fuel. It was high-octane, clean-burning hatred. "You should have looked at the resume, Walter," I said to the empty room. "I didn't go to community college for business administration. I went to Quantico for forensic accounting." I stood up. My legs were stiff, but my mind was racing. It was time to initiate phase 2. They had the dumb secretary fired. Now they were going to have to deal with the ghost. Tuesday morning brought rain. Not the cleansing kind, but the gray, miserable state drizzle that turns the world into a smudge. I sat at my kitchen table, sipping coffee that was vastly superior to the swill in the Omni Core break room, watching the digital ant farm on my laptop. Brandt had brought in cleaners. I could see the network traffic spiking. It was chaotic, sporadic, the digital equivalent of someone running around a room with a shredder, feeding it random documents. My insider in records, Susan, sent me a text via an encrypted messaging app disguised as a Sudoku game. "Susan, it's a bloodbath. Murphy is interrogating the interns, asking if they ever saw you with a flash drive. Me, tell him I used to eat flash drives for lunch. Good for fiber. Susan, lol. Seriously though, they brought in some outside IT guy. Looks like he lives in his mom's basement, wearing a Crypto King t-shirt. Crypto King? Perfect." Brandt had hired a discount hacker. I tapped into the internal security camera feed. I still had access to the camera in the hallway outside the server room because they hadn't changed the default factory password in 8 years. I watched as a young guy with a majestic neckbeard and a hoodie plugged a laptop into the main switch. He was trying to wipe the server logs. I could tell because the system performance dropped by 40%. He was running a brute force deletion script. It was sloppy. It was noisy. "Oh, honey," I whispered, watching him on my screen. "You're not wiping the data, you're just hiding the shortcuts." He was deleting the pointers to the files, but the data blocks themselves were still sitting on the hard drives, waiting to be recovered by anyone with a basic understanding of forensics. But let them think it's gone. Confidence is their weakness. Then Murphy walked into the frame. He was pacing, yelling at the IT kid. I couldn't hear the audio, but I could read the body language. Murphy was panicked. He was pointing at the server rack, making chopping motions with his hand. "Cut it, kill it." My phone buzzed again. Susan, Murphy is calling ex-employees. He just called Dave from 3 years ago asking if you ever talked about Cayman or offshore accounts. I laughed, a dry, humorless sound. Murphy was doing my work for me. By calling around and asking specific questions about offshore accounts, he was confirming to everyone that there were offshore accounts. He was spreading the rumors faster than I ever could. "Keep digging, Murphy," I murmured. "You're digging your own grave." I decided to help them out. I opened a terminal window and executed a small script I'd written weeks ago. It was a breadcrumb, a digital trail. The script created a sudden, localized activity spike in a dormant folder on the shared drive. The folder was labeled Archive 2020 Personal. It was empty except for one file, a receipt for a pizza I ordered 3 years ago. But to the crypto king monitoring the network, that spike would look like a data exfiltration in progress. On the camera feed, I saw the IT kid jump. He pointed at his screen. Murphy rushed over, his face turning the color of boiled ham. They were panicking. They thought I was inside the system, stealing data right now. I wasn't. I was sitting 5 miles away eating toast. Murphy grabbed his radio. He started shouting. The IT kid was typing furiously, trying to block the intruder. He initiated a system-wide lockdown. Access denied. The entire Omnicore network went dark. Email, phones, shared drives, everything. The IT kid had panicked and pulled the plug on his own company. I leaned back in my chair and, now they were blind, they couldn't communicate, couldn't trade files, and most importantly, they couldn't process payments. I picked up my phone and texted Susan. "Me, why is the email down?" "Susan, you are evil. The IT guy is crying." Brant just screamed so loud a vein popped in his forehead. This was the grime I lived for. The muddy, messy reality of corporate incompetence. They thought they were playing 4D chess, but they were actually just eating the pieces. But the fun was just starting. While they were running around in the dark, trying to reboot their servers, I prepared the physical package. A simple manila envelope, no return address. Inside, a single sheet of paper. A printout of the Viridian Tactical Supplies vendor agreement signed by Walter Brandt, and highlighted in neon yellow, Clause 44B, mandatory external data redundancy. I wasn't going to send it to Brandt. That would be too kind. I addressed the envelope to the senior compliance officer at Raytheon, Omnicore's biggest client, the client that accounted for 80% of their revenue. I sealed the envelope. The glue tasted like victory. Phase 3, I said to the empty room. Let's see how they handle the light. The coffee shop across the street from Omnicore, the Daily Grind, had terrible acoustics and even worse bagels, but it had a perfect view of the lobby. I sat in a booth by the window, wearing a baseball cap and sunglasses like I was dodging paparazzi, though really I was just dodging former coworkers who might come in for latte. It was 10 a.m. on Wednesday. The blog post had gone live at 9:45 a.m. It wasn't the New York Times. Not yet. It was a niche industry watchdog blog called the Federal Ledger. Small, but read by everyone who mattered in DC contracting circles. Title: Midwest contractor linked to ghost vendors and inflated logistics costs. It didn't name Omnicore directly. It cited sources close to the investigation and mentioned a mid-sized firm in Ohio. But it included a redacted screenshot of an invoice. An invoice for tactical folding chairs at $800 a pop. I watched the lobby through the window. It started slowly. A receptionist looked at her phone, frowned, and whispered to the guard. Then a suit walked by, checked his BlackBerry. Yes, some of them still used Blackberries, and stopped dead in his tracks. By 10:15, the lobby was a hive of agitated insects. I saw Brandt storm through the glass doors, phone glued to his ear. He looked disheveled. His tie was slightly askew. He was shouting at someone on the other end. Probably the PR firm he kept on retainer for reputation management, which was really just a guy named Chad who knew how to delete Yelp reviews. My burner phone buzzed. It was Zero. "We have movement," Zero said. "Raytheon just flagged Omnicore's vendor status. They're pausing payments pending a review." "Fast," I said, blowing on my coffee. "The envelope must have arrived." "Brandt is calling in favors," Zero continued. "He's trying to reach Senator Klein." "Klein isn't taking the call." "Of course he isn't. Klein can smell a corpse from 3 states away. He won't attach himself to a sinking ship." "Are you ready for extraction?" Zero asked. "We can pull you in. Deposition is ready." I watched Murphy run across the lobby, literally run, waving a piece of paper. He looked like a man trying to catch a bus that had already left. "Not yet," I said. "I want them to sweat a little longer." I want them to turn on each other. Angela, this is dangerous. If they figure out you're the source. They suspect, I said, but they don't know. They think I'm just a disgruntled ex-employee leaking petty grievances. They don't know I'm a DOJ asset. If they knew that, they'd be running for the border, not calling PR. Don't get cocky. I'm not cocky, I'm paid.